The nurse refused to unplug him. 3 weeks later, Hell's Angel opened his eyes. I'll continue the scene between the starting and ending points, maintaining the established tension and emotional depth while following the story's guidelines. The harsh fluorescent lights cast shadows across Luca Vetro's scarred face as Mia stood her ground. Around her, the medical team exchanged worried glances, their whispers filling the tense silence of the ICU room. "Miss Delgado," Dr. Peterson's voice carried a warning tone. "This man is Hell's Angel. The police have confirmed it. Do you understand what keeping him alive could mean?" Mia's fingers tightened around the medical chart. The weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders, but she couldn't shake the pull she felt toward the unconscious man. Despite the brutal reputation that preceded him, something about his vulnerable state stirred her protective instincts. "I took an oath," she said firmly, meeting Dr. Peterson's concerned gaze. "We all did. His identity doesn't change that." A nurse behind her muttered, "His kind doesn't deserve our help." Mia turned sharply. "That's not our call to make." She moved closer to Luca's bedside, checking his vitals for the 100th time. His chest rose and fell steadily, each breath a small victory against death. The bruises on his face told stories of violence she didn't want to imagine. Dr. Peterson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The board wants us to withdraw care. They're worried about repercussions. If rival families find out he's here, then we'll deal with that if it happens." Mia cut him off. She studied the monitor readings, noting small improvements in his stats. "Look at these numbers. He's fighting. As long as there's a chance, I won't give up on him." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of machines. Mia knew her colleagues thought she was naive, maybe even stupid, but she couldn't explain the inexplicable pull she felt, the certainty that letting Luca Vetro die would be the biggest mistake of her life. She checked his IV lines, adjusting the flow slightly. His skin felt warm under her touch. Too warm. Fever was setting in. "He needs antibiotics," she announced, already reaching for supplies, "and fresh dressings on these wounds." "Mia," Dr. Peterson's tone softened with concern. "You're putting yourself at risk. The moment word gets out that you're the one keeping him alive, then let it get out." She prepared the injection with steady hands, though her heart raced. "I'm doing my job. Nothing more." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. There was something about Luca Vetro that called to her. Maybe it was the way his face softened in unconsciousness, making him look almost peaceful despite his injuries. Or perhaps it was the mysterious tattoo on his chest, a fallen angel with broken wings, visible beneath the hospital gown. The next hour passed in a blur of medical procedures. Mia worked methodically, cleaning wounds, checking vitals, and administering medication. She tried to ignore the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach as she realized the full weight of her decision. His condition suddenly deteriorated. The monitors screamed warnings as his blood pressure dropped dangerously low. "He's crashing," Mia called out, already starting chest compressions. "Get a crash cart in here." The room erupted into controlled chaos. As the team worked to stabilize him, Mia caught glimpses of movement in the hallway. Dark-suited men with hard eyes, gathering like shadows. The underworld was already aware of their boss's location. They managed to stabilize him, but he needed surgery. As the orderlies prepared to move him, Mia stepped back, watching the controlled chaos unfold. Her scrubs were stained with his blood, her hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline wore off. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today." Now, back to the story. The steady beeping of monitors filled the dimly lit hospital room as Mia adjusted Luca Vetro's IV drip. 3 days had passed since she'd made the decision that would probably end her career. Or worse. Her fingers trembled slightly as she checked his vitals, trying not to stare at the strong line of his jaw or the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. "You're not supposed to be in here," Sarah, another nurse, whispered from the doorway. "Administrator's orders." Mia straightened her spine, but didn't turn around. "He's my patient." "He's a monster, Mia. Everyone knows what he does to people who cross him." The bruises on his face had started to fade, revealing high cheekbones and full lips that seemed at odds with his reputation. Mia had seen the tattoos that covered his chest when they'd brought him in. Beautiful artwork mixed with brutal scars that told stories she probably didn't want to know. "I took an oath," Mia said firmly, adjusting his blanket. "We don't get to choose who lives or dies." Sarah sighed and left, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Mia found herself alone again with the most dangerous man in New York City. Her hand moved to check the bandage on his chest, and she gasped when her fingers brushed his warm skin. Even unconscious, he radiated a kind of power she couldn't explain. Her heart raced every time she had to touch him, as if her body knew something her mind refused to acknowledge. The room felt smaller somehow, more intimate in the late afternoon shadows. Mia found herself talking to him sometimes, wondering if he could hear her. She told him about her day, about the other patients, about anything except the growing whispers in the hospital about who he was and what would happen when he woke up. "Your fever's finally breaking," she murmured, pressing the back of her hand to his forehead. "But you're not out of danger yet." She'd memorized every detail of his face over the past 3 days. The slight crease between his brows that never fully smoothed out, even in sleep. The tiny scar at the corner of his mouth. The dark stubble that had grown in along his jaw. Mia checked his chest tube, noting the drainage had decreased significantly. His body was healing, fighting back from the brink of death she'd pulled him from. Part of her wondered if she should be afraid of what would happen when he opened his eyes, but something deeper told her it was too late for fear. The sunset painted the room in shades of orange and gold as her shift neared its end. She recorded his latest vitals in his chart, trying to ignore the armed men she knew stood guard outside his door. They never interfered with her work, but their presence was a constant reminder of exactly who lay in that bed. A slight change in the monitor's rhythm made her pause. She looked up from the chart and froze. Luca's eyes were open, dark and intense as they fixed on her face. The air seemed to crystallize between them, heavy with unspoken threats and promises. She should call for help. She should press the emergency button. She should run. But she couldn't move, caught in his predatory gaze like a mouse before a snake. His lips parted slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was rough from disuse, but carried an unmistakable note of command. "You're not going anywhere." 4 simple words that changed everything. Mia felt them settle over her like a physical weight, binding her to this moment, to this man, to whatever dark future lay ahead. The heart monitor's steady beeping filled the dim hospital room as Mia checked Luca's vitals. His dark eyes followed her every movement, predatory and alert despite the pain medication coursing through his system. The bruises on his face had begun to fade to sickly yellows and greens, but the dangerous energy radiating from him had only intensified since he'd regained consciousness. "Your blood pressure is still elevated," Mia said, trying to maintain professional detachment. "You need to rest." "What I need," Luca's voice came out gravelly but commanding, "is for you to stop pretending this is a normal patient situation." He caught her wrist as she reached to adjust his IV, his grip firm but not painful. "I don't need any more doctors, just you." Mia's pulse quickened under his touch. "Mr. Vetro, hospital protocol requires—" "I don't give a fuck about protocol," His thumb traced circles on the inside of her wrist. "You saved my life when others wanted me dead. That makes you mine now." She tried to pull away, but he held fast. "I was just doing my job." "No." His dark eyes bore into hers. "You made a choice, the right choice, and now you'll continue to be my private nurse." "That's not how this works," Mia protested, even as something deep inside her trembled at his intensity. "You need a full medical team, physical therapy, proper—" "I have arrangements being made," Luca cut her off. "My people will handle everything. Your only concern is following my orders." The clinical white walls seemed to close in around them. Mia was acutely aware of how alone they were in this private wing of the hospital. "And if I refuse?" His lips curved into a dangerous smile. "You won't." She finally managed to extract her wrist from his grip, but the phantom sensation of his touch lingered. "You can't force me to—" "I'm not forcing anything," Luca said softly. "You're already mine. You sealed that fate the moment you chose to keep me alive." The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. She had known, hadn't she? Deep down, she'd known saving him would have consequences. "I'll give you everything you need," he continued. "Private quarters, excellent pay, full protection. All you have to do is say yes." Mia's mouth went dry. "And if I say no?" His expression hardened. "That's not an option I'm willing to discuss." She turned away, needing to escape his penetrating stare. "I need coffee, and time to think." "Take your break," Luca allowed, "but don't take too long. I'm not a patient man." Mia hurried from the room, her hands shaking. As she stepped into the hallway, she froze. Two large men in dark suits stood stationed on either side of the door, their bulging jackets clearly concealing weapons. They nodded to her respectfully, but their presence sent ice through her veins. She was halfway to the break room when Luca's voice carried from his room, soft but clear. "You're mine now, nurse. Forever." The words followed her like a shadow, and Mia knew with crushing certainty that her life as she knew it was over. She had saved a devil, and now she would have to pay the price. The morning light filtered through the hospital room's windows, casting long shadows across Luca's bed. Mia stood at the foot of it, her fingers clutching her nursing clipboard so tightly her knuckles turned white. She'd rehearsed this speech all night, but now, facing him, the words felt hollow. "Mr. Vetro, I can't be your private nurse," she began, forcing herself to meet his dark gaze. "I have other patients, responsibilities, a life outside these walls." Luca remained silent, watching her with that unnerving stillness that made her skin prickle. His chest rose and fell steadily, the bandages stark white against his bruised skin. Despite his injuries, he radiated power even from the hospital bed. "I'm grateful you trust me with your care," Mia continued, her voice wavering slightly. "But this can't be my life. I need to return to my regular duties." Still, he said nothing. His eyes tracked her every movement as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. "Please say something," she whispered, hating how weak she sounded. Luca's lips curved into a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Are you finished?" The cold amusement in his voice made her shiver. Mia took a step backward, then another, edging toward the door. "I'll have another nurse assigned to you. Someone just as qualified." "Come here," he commanded, his voice soft but leaving no room for argument. Mia's feet moved of their own accord, betraying her mind's desperate signals to run. She stopped beside his bed, close enough to smell his cologne beneath the antiseptic hospital scent. "Closer," he demanded. She leaned in, her breath catching as his hand shot out with surprising speed, for someone so injured. His fingers wrapped around her wrist, warm and unyielding. "You're not leaving," Luca said, each word precise and measured. "Ever." His grip tightened, not enough to hurt, but enough to remind her of his strength. "This is your world now." Mia's pulse raced beneath his touch. She tried to pull away, but his hold was absolute. "You can't just—" "I can," he interrupted. "I will." His thumb stroked the inside of her wrist, the gentle motion at odds with his harsh words. "You belong to me." The truth of it crashed over her like a wave. The armed guards outside, the way the hospital staff avoided her eyes, the thick tension that filled every room she entered. She was already caught in his web. Had been since the moment she refused to let him die. Her shoulders slumped in defeat, and something flickered in Luca's eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or triumph. He tugged her closer until she could feel his breath on her face. "Good girl," he murmured. And despite everything, heat bloomed in her chest at the praise. "Now that we understand each other, check my bandages. They need changing." Mia nodded, not trusting her voice. When Luca released her wrist, she felt the phantom pressure of his fingers, a brand marking her as his. She reached for the medical supplies with trembling hands, knowing that with each passing moment, she was sinking deeper into his dangerous world. The morning sun filtered through the hospital room's blinds, casting striped shadows across Luca's bed. Mia's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she checked his vitals, trying to ignore the intensity of his stare. His eyes tracked her every movement, like a predator studying its prey, making her skin prickle with awareness. "Your blood pressure is improving," she said, keeping her voice professional despite the tension crackling between them. The monitors beeped steadily, a rhythmic reminder of how alive he was, how dangerous he remained, even in this weakened state. Luca didn't respond, but his jaw tightened when she reached to adjust his IV. His fingers brushed against her wrist, and she froze, caught in the unexpected gentleness of the touch. For a man known for his brutality, his hands were surprisingly warm. "You're afraid," he observed, his voice rough from disuse. It wasn't a question. Mia pulled back, busying herself with his chart. "I'm doing my job, Mr. Vetro." "Luca," he corrected, still watching her with those dark, penetrating eyes. "And you're lying. Your hands shake when you think I'm not looking." She gripped the chart tighter, knowing he was right. The man before her was a study in contradictions. His bruised body spoke of vulnerability, but power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. The notorious Hell's Angel, who'd ordered countless deaths, now lay dependent on her care. As she changed his bandages, she noticed something shift in his expression. The hard edges softened, just slightly, when her fingers gently cleaned around his wounds. His breathing changed, becoming more measured, controlled. "You're different," he murmured, almost to himself. "The others, they're afraid to touch me, but you—" "I told you, I'm just doing my job," Mia repeated, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Something had changed since that first night when she'd refused to let him die. Luca's hand shot out, gripping her wrist again. This time, there was nothing gentle about it. "Look at me," he commanded. Mia met his gaze, fighting the urge to pull away. His eyes held shadows she couldn't comprehend, depths of darkness that made her shiver. "I was 12 the first time I saw someone die," he said suddenly, his voice low and intense. "My father made me watch, said it would make me stronger." His grip loosened slightly, but he didn't let go. "By 15, I had killed 3 men. By 20, I'd lost count." Mia stood perfectly still, caught between horror and fascination. The clinical white walls of the hospital room seemed to fade away, leaving only this moment, this confession. "Violence isn't just what I do," he continued, his thumb tracing circles on her pulse point. It's what I am, what this world made me. His words hung heavy in the air between them. Mia could feel his pain, raw and real beneath the surface of his controlled exterior. The monster of the underworld was showing her something few had ever seen, a glimpse of the man beneath the myths. "You can't understand me," Luca said, his voice taking on an edge of bitterness. "Nobody does." His eyes locked onto hers, intense and unwavering. "But you'll learn." Mia stood frozen, unable to form a response. The weight of his words, the implications of what he was revealing, left her speechless. She could feel herself being pulled deeper into his world, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. The morning light filtered through the hospital room's windows, casting long shadows across Luca's bed. Mia stood at the foot of it, her hands gripping the metal rail until her knuckles turned white. She'd spent the last hour gathering her courage for this confrontation. "I won't do it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm not going to be your private nurse at your mansion." Luca's dark eyes fixed on her, his expression unchanging. He lay propped against the pillows, looking more like a king on his throne than a patient in recovery. The bruises on his face had started to fade, revealing the sharp angles of his jaw and cheekbones. "Is that so?" His voice was soft, dangerous. Mia lifted her chin. "I have a life outside these walls, a career, friends. I can't just disappear into your world because you demand it." A cold smile spread across his face, making her stomach drop. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "Come here," he ordered. When she hesitated, his smile widened. "Now." Her feet moved before her brain could protest. She stopped beside his bed, close enough to smell his expensive cologne beneath the antiseptic hospital scent. Luca reached out, his fingers wrapping around her wrist. His touch was gentle but firm, a reminder of the strength he possessed even in his weakened state. "You think you have a choice?" "Everyone has a choice," Mia replied, trying to pull away. His grip tightened. "Look at me," he commanded. When she met his gaze, she saw something dark and possessive there. "You made your choice the moment you decided to save my life, the moment you defied orders to keep me breathing." "That was different. That was my duty as a nurse. That was fate," he cut her off. "And now you're mine." Mia's pulse raced beneath his fingers. "I'm not a possession, Mr. Vetro. I'm a person with rights." His laugh cut through her words, sharp and humorless. "Rights? You think rights matter in my world?" He pulled her closer until she could feel his breath on her face. "Let me explain something to you, nurse. The moment you chose to save me, you entered my world. And in my world, I make the rules." She tried to steady her breathing, to hide how much he affected her. "I won't be controlled." "No?" His free hand came up to brush her cheek, the touch sending unwanted shivers down her spine. "Then let me make you an offer." The way he said it made her blood run cold. His eyes held hers, intense and calculating. "Work for me, and I'll make sure you never have to work again," he said, his thumb tracing her jawline. Then his grip tightened, just enough to remind her of his power. "Refuse, and I'll show you what happens to those who disobey me." Mia's breath caught in her throat. The threat hung in the air between them, heavy and real. She could see in his eyes that this wasn't an idle warning. It was a promise. And suddenly, she understood just how dangerous a game she'd stumbled into. The morning sun barely pierced through Mia's bedroom curtains when 3 sharp knocks echoed through her apartment. Her heart jumped into her throat. She knew exactly who it was. After yesterday's confrontation with Luca, this was inevitable. She peered through the peephole. Two men in black suits stood outside, their muscular frames filling her narrow hallway. Their stance was casual, but their eyes scanned the corridor with predatory awareness. "Miss Delgado," one called out, his voice deceptively gentle. "Mr. Vetro sent us to collect you." Mia's hands trembled as she pressed them against the door. "I need to get ready for work." "Your shift at the hospital has been cancelled. Permanently." The other man's voice was harder, brooking no argument. "Mr. Vetro has arranged everything." Of course he had. Mia's stomach churned as she realized how thoroughly Luca had planned this. He'd probably made the arrangements before she'd even tried to refuse him yesterday. "5 minutes, the first man said. "Then we come in, whether you open the door or not." Mia glanced around her apartment, her safe haven, her normal life. Everything she owned, everything she'd worked for, was here. But she knew better than to test Luca's patience. She'd seen the darkness in his eyes yesterday, the cold calculation behind his offer that wasn't really an offer at all. With shaking hands, she threw some clothes into a duffel bag. Toiletries. Phone charger. Her nursing kit. It felt surreal, like she was watching someone else pack for their own kidnapping. When she opened the door, the men's expressions remained impassive. One took her bag, while the other gestured toward the elevator. "This way, Miss Delgado." The ride down was silent. Mia's mind raced through possible escape routes, but she knew it was futile. Luca Vetro's reach extended far beyond these two men. He controlled half the city. There was nowhere she could hide that he wouldn't find her. A sleek black SUV waited outside, its windows tinted so dark they looked like empty spaces in reality. The first man opened the back door for her while the second stowed her bag in the trunk. As they drove through the city, Mia watched her familiar world slip away. They passed through neighborhoods she knew, then into areas she'd only heard about, where the streets got cleaner, the buildings more imposing, the cars more expensive. This was Luca's territory, where money and power ruled absolutely. The SUV wound its way up a private road, trees pressing in on both sides. When they emerged from the green tunnel, Mia's breath caught. Luca's mansion sprawled before them, a modernist masterpiece of glass and stone that seemed to float above the manicured grounds. Security cameras tracked their movement as they approached the gate. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their presence a stark reminder that this beautiful prison was still a prison. The SUV pulled up to the front entrance, where marble steps led to massive double doors. One of the men opened her door while the other retrieved her bag. Mia's legs felt like lead as she climbed out of the car. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of expensive flowers and freshly cut grass. Everything about this place screamed wealth and power and danger. Behind the beautiful facade, she could feel the weight of violence and secrets pressing in on her. She heard him before she saw him, footsteps approaching from behind, measured and deliberate. The hair on the back of her neck stood up as Luca's presence enveloped her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the expensive cologne that barely masked the predator beneath. His breath ghosted across her ear as he leaned in close. "Welcome to your new life." Those words sealed her fate. There would be no going back to her old life, her normal world. She had crossed a threshold into Luca's domain, and like everything else he claimed, she now belonged to him. Mia's footsteps echoed through the marble halls of Luca's mansion as she made her way to his bedroom. The grandeur of the place still took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork, and furnishings that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. But beneath all the luxury, there was something cold and threatening, like the man who owned it all. She pushed open his bedroom door, medical supplies in hand. Luca sat propped up against silk pillows, his muscled chest bare except for the bandages. His dark eyes followed her every movement as she approached the bed. "Good morning," she said professionally, keeping her voice steady. "Time to check your wounds." He didn't respond, just watched her with that predatory intensity that made her skin tingle. As she reached for his bandages, his hand caught her wrist. His touch sent electricity through her body. "Your hands are shaking," he observed, his voice low and rough. Mia pulled away. "They're not. Now please, let me do my job." Working quickly, she removed his old bandages. Her fingers brushed against his warm skin, and she tried to ignore how his muscles tensed under her touch. The bullet wounds were healing well, but several deep knife cuts still needed attention. "Does this hurt?" she asked, pressing gently near one of the wounds. "No." His eyes never left her face. "Nothing hurts when you touch me." Heat flooded her cheeks. She focused on applying new bandages, desperate to maintain professional distance. But it was getting harder each day. The way he looked at her, spoke to her, it stirred something dangerous inside her. "You need to start walking more," she said, changing the subject. "It'll help with your recovery." "Then help me up, nurse." Mia moved closer, sliding an arm around his waist as he swung his legs off the bed. He was solid muscle, and even injured, his strength was obvious. As he stood, he leaned into her more than necessary, his breath warm against her neck. They walked slowly around the room, his arm heavy across her shoulders. With each step, she became more aware of him, his scent, his heat, the way his body moved against hers. The tension between them crackled like electricity. "You're good at this," he murmured close to her ear. "Taking care of me." "It's my job," she replied stiffly. "Is that all it is?" She tried to create distance between them, but his grip tightened. "Mr. Vetro." "Luca," he corrected. "Say my name." "This isn't appropriate," she protested, her heart hammering. They reached the bed, and instead of letting her help him sit, he turned to face her. His hands slid down to her waist, holding her in place. She could feel the heat of his body, see the dangerous gleam in his eyes. "Nothing about this is appropriate," he said, pulling her closer. "But that doesn't stop you from wanting me." One hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should push him away, maintain boundaries, remember who he was, a dangerous man who had essentially kidnapped her. But her body betrayed her, leaning into his touch. Luca's face lowered to hers, his lips just inches away. The world seemed to stop, suspended in that moment of anticipation. His voice was barely a whisper. "You want me, don't you?" Mia's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. With trembling hands, she pressed against his chest and pushed him away. The tension in Luca's study crackled like electricity before a storm. Mia stood her ground, fists clenched at her sides as she faced him. The golden light from his desk lamp cast shadows across his scarred face, making him look more dangerous than ever. "I won't stay here forever," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound firm. "I'm not one of your possessions." Luca's jaw tightened as he moved around his massive mahogany desk. His steps were predatory, measured, closing the distance between them with deliberate slowness. "You made your choice the moment you kept me alive." "That was my job." Mia took a step back, bumping into the bookshelf behind her. The leather-bound volumes pressed against her spine as Luca continued his approach. "No." His voice dropped lower, sending shivers down her spine. "Your job ended when your shift did. But you stayed. You chose this." "I didn't choose to be your prisoner." The words came out as barely more than a whisper. Luca's hand shot out, gripping her chin. His touch was firm but not painful, forcing her to meet his gaze. Those dark eyes bore into her, filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're not my prisoner, Mia." The way he said her name made her knees weak. "You're mine. There's a difference." Before she could protest, his mouth crashed down on hers. The kiss was hard, demanding, full of pent-up frustration and desire. His other hand tangled in her hair, holding her in place as his lips moved against hers. Mia's mind went blank. The heat of his body pressed against hers, the taste of him on her lips. It overwhelmed her senses. His cologne filled her nostrils, a mix of expensive leather and something darker. Dangerous. Her hands, which had risen to push him away, instead clutched at his shirt. The kiss deepened, and Mia felt herself responding despite every rational thought screaming at her to stop. Luca's tongue traced her bottom lip, demanding entry, and she found herself yielding to him. A low growl rumbled in his chest as she parted her lips. For a moment, the world disappeared. There was no mafia, no violence, no complicated power dynamics, just the burning heat between them. His hand moved from her chin to cup her face, his touch surprisingly gentle despite the fierce passion of his kiss. Reality came crashing back as his teeth grazed her lower lip. This was Luca Vetro, the man who had taken her freedom, who killed people without remorse, who ruled his criminal empire with brutal efficiency. The same man whose life she had saved, whose vulnerability she had witnessed, whose pain she had helped heal. The conflicting emotions overwhelmed her. Anger mixed with desire, fear with attraction. Her hand moved before she could think, connecting with his cheek in a sharp slap that echoed through the study. Luca pulled back, his eyes darkening dangerously. A red mark bloomed where her hand had struck him. Mia's chest heaved as she struggled to catch her breath, her lips still tingling from his kiss. "You can't do this to me," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "I won't be your toy." The silence that followed was deafening. Luca's expression was unreadable, a mask of control sliding back into place. Without a word, he turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. Mia watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest. Relief flooded through her at his departure, but it was tainted by an undeniable disappointment that made her hate herself just a little bit more. The black SUV glided through the night, its tinted windows concealing the passengers within. Mia sat rigid beside Luca, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't wanted to come, but Luca had insisted, or rather commanded. "You need to see who I really am," he'd said, his voice leaving no room for argument. The warehouse district loomed ahead, a maze of abandoned buildings and broken dreams. Mia's heart pounded as their vehicle pulled up to a nondescript building. Two armed men opened the car doors, and Luca emerged first, his presence commanding attention even in the darkness. "Stay close," he ordered, his hand finding the small of her back. The touch sent shivers down her spine. Not entirely from fear. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into a meeting space. A long table dominated the center, surrounded by men in expensive suits. Their eyes followed Luca's every move, but it was Mia who drew their curious stares. She could feel the weight of their gazes, heavy with speculation and hunger. Luca guided her to a chair slightly behind his position at the head of the table. The message was clear. She belonged to him, but she wasn't part of this world. Not yet. The meeting started civilly enough. Discussion of territories, profit margins, and distribution routes. Mia watched Luca transform before her eyes. Gone was any trace of the vulnerable patient she'd nursed back to health. This was Hell's Angel, the man whose name made hardened criminals tremble. Then everything changed in an instant. One of the men, younger than the others, stood up suddenly. "This is bullshit," he shouted, slamming his hands on the table. "We don't answer to you, Vetro." The room went deadly silent. Mia's breath caught in her throat as Luca slowly rose from his chair. His movements were fluid, predatory. Before anyone could react, he had the man by the throat. "Watch," Luca commanded Mia, his voice ice cold. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. The young man's face turned purple as Luca's grip tightened. No one moved to help him. No one dared. The crack of bones breaking echoed through the warehouse. The man's body crumpled to the floor, lifeless. Luca straightened his suit jacket, completely unaffected by the murder he'd just committed. "Anyone else want to question my authority?" His voice carried through the silent room. The other men shook their heads, their faces pale with fear. Mia felt bile rise in her throat. She'd known what Luca was capable of, but seeing it firsthand was different. The clinical detachment in his eyes as he took a life, the way violence seemed to come as naturally as breathing. It terrified her. The ride back to the mansion was silent. Mia pressed herself against the car door, trying to put as much distance between herself and Luca as possible. But in the confined space, she could still smell his cologne, mixed with the metallic scent of blood. When they arrived, Luca dismissed his men with a wave. He gripped Mia's arm, not roughly but firmly enough to make his intention clear. She followed him up the grand staircase, her legs trembling with each step. The bedroom door closed behind them with a soft click. Luca turned to her, his eyes holding that same dangerous intensity she'd witnessed at the warehouse. The moonlight streaming through the windows cast shadows across his face, making him look more predator than man. "You're afraid," he stated, taking a step closer. "Should I not be?" Mia's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Good." He reached out, trailing a finger along her jawline. "Fear keeps people alive in my world. But you—" His touch lingered on her lips. "You need to understand what I am, what I'm capable of." The events of the night played through Mia's mind, the casual violence, the absolute power he wielded. Yet here she stood, drawn to him despite everything she'd witnessed. "You'll never forget what you saw tonight," Luca said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you'll never doubt my power." Mia found Luca in the dimly lit library, his broad silhouette stark against the wall-length window. Outside, rain pattered against the glass, casting shifting shadows across his face. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders tensed, acknowledging her presence. "You should be resting," she said softly, noting how he favored his left side. The wounds from the assassination attempt hadn't fully healed. "Come here." His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Mia hesitated, then crossed the room. The Persian rug muffled her footsteps as she approached. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands as they gripped the window frame. "3 weeks ago," he began, "I trusted the wrong person. My own blood." His knuckles whitened. "My brother Enzo. We grew up together, fought together, built this empire together. But power changes people." Thunder rumbled outside, and Mia wrapped her arms around herself. The library suddenly felt colder. "I saw the signs, the late-night meetings, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. But I ignored them because he was my brother." Luca's voice cracked on the last word. "The night they tried to kill me, Enzo arranged everything. He knew my schedule, my security detail, my escape routes." Mia remembered that night in the hospital. Luca's broken body, the countless bullet wounds, the massive internal bleeding. How did you survive? A bitter laugh escaped him. Pure spite, maybe. Or maybe. His eyes found hers in the window's reflection. Maybe something else was keeping me here. The weight of his gaze made her breath catch. She watched as he absently touched the scar on his chest, visible through his partially unbuttoned shirt. Family is supposed to be sacred in our world, he continued. But loyalty? That's rarer than gold. His fingers traced the window's cool surface. You want to know why I keep you here, Mia? Why I won't let you leave? She nodded, unable to find her voice. Because when everyone wanted to pull the plug, when my own family had written me off as dead, you fought for me, a stranger, an enemy even. He turned to face her, and Mia saw raw pain in his eyes. You showed me more loyalty in one night than my own blood brother showed me in 30 years. Tears welled in his eyes, catching her off guard. This wasn't the cold-blooded killer she'd heard about, not the man who ruled New York's underworld with an iron fist. This was someone else. Someone broken, betrayed, desperately holding on to the one person who'd shown him genuine care. I'm not good at trust, he admitted. I'm not good at letting people in, but you... He reached out, his fingers hovering near her cheek without touching. You crashed through every wall I built. Mia's heart thundered in her chest. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell his expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. The library felt too small suddenly, too intimate. The man they call Hell's Angel, he continued, dropping his hand. He's a monster, a killer, someone who takes what he wants and destroys anyone who stands in his way. His voice grew hoarse. But with you... She watched as he struggled with emotions she'd never seen him display before. Vulnerability, fear, maybe even hope. The tough exterior cracked further, showing glimpses of the wounded soul beneath. Luca swiped roughly at his eyes, straightening his shoulders. When he looked at her again, his expression was unreadable, a mask sliding back into place. I'm not the man you think I am. The mansion's marble halls felt colder tonight. Mia wrapped her arms around herself as she made her way to Luca's study, the click of her heels echoing against the walls. Something had changed. The usual guards had doubled, their faces tense, hands never far from their weapons. She found Luca standing by the window, his broad shoulders rigid beneath his tailored suit. The study, usually immaculate, was in disarray. Papers scattered across his desk, a broken glass on the floor. His knuckles were white where they gripped the window frame. Luca? Her voice came out softer than intended. He didn't turn around. Someone's been feeding information to the Rossi family. His voice was deadly calm. Every move we've made, they've known about it. The assassination attempt wasn't random. Mia's stomach twisted. She'd heard whispers about the Rossi family, rivals who'd been trying to take over Luca's territory for years. How do you know? Because only 5 people knew about the meeting that night. He finally turned, and Mia nearly stepped back at the raw fury in his eyes. 5 people I trusted with my life. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavy with tension. Guards moved past the door more frequently now, their footsteps a constant reminder of the danger closing in. They're planning something bigger. Luca moved to his desk, spreading out what looked like surveillance photos. My brother Enzo hasn't been seen in days. His phone's dead. His usual spots are empty. Mia's hand trembled as she picked up one of the photos. You think your own brother? Family means nothing in this world. His laugh was bitter, empty. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. She watched as he paced the room, his movements like a caged animal. The man she'd nursed back to health was disappearing, replaced by something darker, more dangerous. Yet somehow she wasn't afraid. At least, not for herself. "The mansion's secure," he continued, more to himself than her. "I've doubled the guards, changed all the access codes. Nobody gets in or out without my permission." "Am I—" Mia hesitated. "Am I a target now?" Luca stopped pacing. In 3 long strides, he was in front of her, his hands gripping her arms. His touch was firm but not painful. "You're whatever they think will hurt me most." The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Mia's heart raced as she processed his words. She was his weakness, the one thing his enemies could use against him. "The nurse's station called earlier," she said quietly. "They want to know when I'm coming back." "You're not." His voice left no room for argument. "This is your home now. I need you where I can protect you." "Luca." "Don't." His grip tightened slightly. "Don't fight me on this, Mia. Not now." She could see the strain in his face, the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. The weight of betrayal sat heavy on his shoulders. Despite everything, despite knowing what he was capable of, she wanted to ease that burden. "Let me help," she whispered. "Tell me what you need." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even vulnerability. For a moment he looked lost, like the injured man she'd refused to unplug all those weeks ago. Then his expression hardened again. He pulled her closer, one hand moving to cup her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he pressed his lips to her forehead. But when he spoke, his voice carried a dangerous edge. "Stay close," he murmured against her skin. "Nobody gets to hurt you." The morning sun filtered through the mansion's tall windows as Mia changed Luca's bandages. Her fingers trembled slightly as they brushed against his bare chest, feeling the hard muscle beneath warm skin. The silence between them was electric, charged with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your wounds are healing well," she said, trying to keep her voice professional. But even to her own ears, it sounded breathless. Luca caught her wrist as she pulled away, his grip firm but gentle. "Look at me, Mia." She forced herself to meet his dark eyes, finding them filled with an emotion she wouldn't name. The dangerous mob boss who'd terrorized New York was looking at her like she was something precious, something he needed to possess. "You're still fighting this," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her inner wrist. "Fighting us." "There is no us," Mia insisted, but the words lacked conviction. "I'm here because you forced me to be." His other hand came up to cup her face, and despite herself, she leaned into his touch. "Are you sure about that, Angel? Because your body tells a different story." Heat flooded her cheeks, but she couldn't pull away. The proximity was intoxicating, his scent. Expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him, making her head spin. "This isn't right," she whispered, even as her free hand came to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate under her palm. "Nothing about me is right," Luca growled, pulling her closer. "I'm a monster, Mia. I've killed men with these hands. I've destroyed lives. But with you—" His voice softened, becoming almost vulnerable. "With you, I want to be better." Anger flared in her chest, breaking through the haze of desire. She yanked herself free from his grip. "Better? You keep me prisoner in your mansion, surrounded by killers. You threaten me, control me." "I protect you." Luca stood up, towering over her. Despite his healing injuries, his presence filled the room with raw power. "Every person in this city would use you against me if they could. Every enemy I have would hurt you to get to me." "Because of choices you made," Mia shot back, her voice rising. "I never asked for any of this." But you're here now, he advanced on her, backing her against the wall. And you feel this too. Stop denying it. His body pressed against hers, and Mia felt her resistance crumbling. Every point of contact sent sparks through her system. His hands braced against the wall on either side of her head, caging her in. "Tell me you don't want this," he challenged, his face inches from hers. "Tell me you don't think about me when you're alone in your room. Tell me you don't dream about my touch." Mia's hands fisted in his shirt, whether to push him away or pull him closer. She wasn't sure anymore. "I hate what you do," she whispered. "I hate what you are. But you don't hate me." His lips brushed against her ear, making her shiver. "You can't hate me any more than I can let you go." Something inside her snapped. With a small sound of frustration, she pulled him down, crushing her lips to his. The kiss was desperate, hungry, years of tension exploding in a single moment. Luca groaned against her mouth, one hand tangling in her hair while the other gripped her hip, pulling her impossibly closer. Mia lost herself in the kiss, in the feel of him, in the dangerous thrill of finally giving in. His tongue swept into her mouth, claiming, demanding, and she met him with equal fervor. It was everything she'd tried to resist, everything she'd denied wanting. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, reality came crashing back. Mia pressed her fingers to her swollen lips, horror dawning as she realized what she'd done. "What am I doing?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. The manila folder landed on Mia's desk with a soft thud. She hadn't meant to find it, hadn't been looking for trouble. But as she organized Luca's medical records in his study, the documents had slipped from between the pages of his file. Now, spread before her, the evidence was undeniable. Bank statements, secret meetings, photographs of Enzo with Luca's enemies. Each piece of paper told a story of betrayal that made her stomach turn. "What are you doing in here?" Luca's voice cut through the silence. Mia's head snapped up, her heart thundering against her ribs. He stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room with that familiar, dangerous energy. But this time, something else lingered beneath the surface, a vulnerability she'd glimpsed before. "Luca," she whispered, "I found something you need to see." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his eyes falling to the scattered documents. The change in his expression was subtle, a slight tightening around his eyes, a barely perceptible clench of his jaw. But Mia had learned to read these small signs. They spoke volumes. "Your brother," she said softly. "He's been working with the Castellanos." Luca's voice was deadly quiet. "Planning my death for months." Mia watched as he picked up one of the photographs. Enzo, caught in mid-conversation with a known rival, the timestamp dating back to weeks before Luca's attempted assassination. "I should have known," Luca muttered, more to himself than to her. The attack was too precise. They knew exactly when to strike. The pain in his voice made Mia's chest ache. She reached for him without thinking, her fingers brushing his arm. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. "Family betrayal cuts the deepest," she said, remembering her own losses. Luca's laugh was bitter. "Family? In this world, that word means nothing. Power is everything." "Not to you," Mia countered. "You trusted him. And that was my mistake." His eyes met hers, dark and intense. "The only person I trust now is you." The weight of his words settled between them, heavy with implication. Before Mia could respond, the study door swung open again. Enzo stood there, his usual charming smile in place. But something was different. Something predatory lurked behind his eyes. "Brother," he said smoothly, "we need to talk." Luca's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by cold, calculating rage. He moved in front of Mia, a subtle but clear gesture of protection. About what? Luca's voice could have frozen hell. About how you've been meeting with the Castellanos? About how you helped them try to kill me? Enzo's smile didn't waver. You always were clever, Luca, but you're not clever enough. His gaze slid to Mia. And now you have a weakness, one that's so easy to exploit. The threat hung in the air like poison. Mia felt Luca tense, saw his hand move toward the gun she knew he kept at his waist. Touch her, Luca said, each word precise and deadly, and I'll show you exactly why they call me Hell's Angel. You're soft, Enzo spat. You've forgotten what it means to be a Vetro. That nurse has made you weak. No. Luca's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. She's made me stronger, because now I have something worth protecting. He turned to Mia, his expression hard, but his eyes holding a warmth reserved only for her. Leave us, he commanded. This is between me and my brother. Luca, she started to protest. I'll kill him, Mia. I'll kill them all if it means keeping you safe. The truth in his words chilled her. This was the man she'd feared at first, the ruthless mafia boss who'd take lives without hesitation. But now she understood him better. His violence wasn't random, it was calculated, protective, driven by a fierce need to defend what was his. And somehow, somewhere along the way, she had become his. The night exploded in gunfire. Glass shattered across the mansion's marble floors as Enzo's men burst through the windows. Mia barely had time to scream before rough hands grabbed her, dragging her away from Luca's study. Get your hands off her! Luca's roar echoed through the halls. He launched himself at the intruders, his fists connecting with brutal precision. But there were too many of them, a gun pressed against Mia's temple. One more move, brother, and she dies. Enzo stepped into view, his smile cruel and calculating. Luca froze, his chest heaving. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, his knuckles raw from fighting. You're dead, he growled. Do you hear me, Enzo? You're fucking dead. Always so dramatic. Enzo clicked his tongue. I want what's mine. The empire, the power, everything you stole from me. He tightened his grip on Mia's arm, making her wince. And now I have the perfect bargaining chip. Mia struggled against her captors, her heart pounding. She caught Luca's gaze, saw the rage and fear warring in his eyes. This was the man beneath the monster, the one who'd let her see his vulnerability, who'd shown her glimpses of his wounded soul. Take me instead, Luca demanded, his voice deadly calm. Let her go. Enzo laughed. Oh no, brother. That's not how this works. He nodded to his men. We're leaving. Try to follow us and she dies. They dragged Mia backward, toward the waiting vehicles outside. She fought every step, but the grip on her arms was iron tight. The last thing she saw was Luca's face, a mask of pure fury and determination. I'm coming for you, he promised, his words carrying across the distance between them. Both of you. Hours passed in a blur of fear and darkness. They kept Mia blindfolded, moving her between locations. She could hear Enzo giving orders, his voice growing more agitated with each passing hour. The blindfold finally came off in a warehouse by the docks. The smell of salt water and rust filled her nostrils. Enzo paced before her, checking his phone obsessively. Your boyfriend's causing quite a mess, he sneered. 15 of my men dead already. He's tearing through the city looking for you. Mia's heart swelled with a mixture of horror and hope. She knew what Luca was capable of, had seen his violence firsthand. But now that violence was for her, because of her. Gunfire erupted outside. Enzo's men scattered, taking up defensive positions. The warehouse doors burst open with enough force to tear them from their hinges. Luca stood in the doorway, covered in blood that wasn't his own. His eyes found Mia's immediately, then locked onto his brother. "Hello, Enzo." What followed was pure chaos. Luca moved like a force of nature, brutal and unstoppable. Bodies fell around him as he cut through Enzo's defenses. Each punch, each shot, brought him closer to Mia. Enzo grabbed her, using her as a shield. "Stay back!" he shouted, pressing a gun to her head. "I'll do it, Luca, I swear I will." But Luca had already seen the opening he needed. In one fluid motion, he threw a knife that embedded itself in Enzo's shoulder. The gun clattered to the ground as Enzo howled in pain. Mia broke free, running straight into Luca's arms. He held her tight with one hand, while the other kept his gun trained on his brother. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Luca told Enzo, his voice ice cold. He pulled Mia closer, pressing his lips to her temple where the gun had been. "I told you I'd protect you," he murmured against her skin, his voice rough with emotion. "And I meant it." The mansion's grand study felt like a tomb. Luca stood by the window, his reflection ghostly against the dark glass. Behind him, maps and surveillance photos covered his mahogany desk. Intelligence gathered on Enzo's operation. His brother's betrayal burned like acid in his veins. "Sir," one of his men entered quietly. "We've confirmed Miss Delgado's location. Enzo's keeping her at the old steel mill." Luca's jaw clenched. Of course, the place where they'd played as children before power and greed had poisoned everything. His fingers traced the gun at his hip, the cold metal grounding him. "How many men?" "At least 20. Heavy artillery. They're expecting us." A humorless smile crossed Luca's face. "Good. I want them to see me coming." He turned from the window, his movements measured and deadly. The past 3 weeks with Mia had changed something in him. Before her, he'd been cold calculation and ruthless precision. Now, with her life in danger, he felt a different kind of power coursing through him, raw, primal, unstoppable. "Get the cars ready, and call Marco. Tell him to bring the special equipment." As his men scrambled to prepare, Luca allowed himself one moment of weakness. He picked up the small silver pendant Mia always wore, the one that had fallen from her neck during the struggle. The metal was still warm, as if holding on to her essence. "I'm coming for you," he whispered. The drive to the steel mill was silent, tension crackling in the air. 3 black SUVs cut through the night, carrying Luca's most trusted soldiers. They'd all seen the change in him since Mia entered his life. They knew this wasn't just about business anymore. The mill loomed ahead, a rusted skeleton against the sky. Floodlights cast harsh shadows across the abandoned machinery. Enzo's men were visible on the catwalks, their weapons glinting. Luca stepped out of the car, adjusting his suit jacket with practiced ease. The weight of his gun was familiar, comforting. He'd killed countless men before, but never his own blood. Tonight would change that. "Boss," his second-in-command murmured, "we could find another way." "No." Luca's voice was ice. "He took what's mine. There is no other way." The first shots rang out as they approached the main entrance. Luca moved like a shadow, his men forming a deadly dance around him. Bodies fell, blood staining the concrete. Each step brought him closer to Mia, closer to ending this chapter of betrayal. Inside the mill, the air was thick with rust and gunpowder. Enzo's voice echoed through the metal cavern, taunting. "Brother, come to save your little nurse? She's quite beautiful, you know. I can see why you've gone soft." Rage surged through Luca's veins. He remembered teaching Enzo to shoot, protecting him from their father's anger, trusting him with everything. Now all that remained was the bitter taste of betrayal. "Show yourself, coward!" Luca's voice boomed through the space. "Face me like a man!" A scream pierced the air. Mia's voice. Luca's heart stuttered, then hardened. He moved faster, more reckless now. His men struggled to keep up as he carved a path through Enzo's defenses. He found them on the upper level. Enzo held Mia at gunpoint, her face bruised but her eyes still defiant. Pride and fury warred in Luca's chest at the sight of her. "Let her go." Luca's voice was deadly quiet. "This is between us." Enzo laughed, pressing the gun harder against Mia's temple. "Always so noble, brother. Always thinking you know best. But look where that got you. Weak, compromised, all because of a woman." "You're wrong." Luca took a step forward. "She made me stronger." The world exploded into chaos. Mia drove her elbow back into Enzo's ribs, a move Luca had taught her weeks ago. As Enzo stumbled, Luca lunged. The brothers crashed together, years of unspoken resentment finally finding release in violence. They fought like animals, all pretense of civilization stripped away. Blood mixed with sweat as they grappled on the metal catwalk. Below, their men continued their own battle, but up here, nothing existed except this final reckoning. The mansion's grand foyer echoed with their footsteps as Luca guided Mia inside, his hand firmly pressed against the small of her back. Blood still stained his expensive suit, a stark reminder of what had transpired mere hours ago. The weight of his brother's death hung heavy in the air between them. Mia watched as Luca's men secured the perimeter, their movements precise and practiced. The atmosphere was different now, tenser, more alert. She could feel it in the way Luca's shoulders remained rigid, in how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. "You need medical attention," Mia said softly, reaching for his injured arm. The wound wasn't deep, but it needed cleaning. Luca caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. "Later." His voice was rough, raw with emotion he refused to show. "First, we need to talk." He led her to his private study, a room she'd only glimpsed before. Dark wooden panels lined the walls, and leather-bound books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves. The space smelled of aged whiskey and power. Luca locked the door behind them. "What happened today?" he began, his back to her as he stared out the window. "It changes everything." Mia stood in the center of the room, her heart pounding. "Your brother! Don't!" The word cut through the air like a blade. Luca turned, his eyes dark with barely contained fury and pain. Enzo made his choice. He threatened what's mine. He had to die. The brutal honesty of his words made Mia shiver. She'd seen the violence firsthand now, witnessed the depths of Luca's ruthlessness. Yet somehow it didn't frighten her as much as it should. "You killed him for me," she whispered. Luca crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. "I killed him because he was a threat, to my empire, to my life." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "To you. And I will kill anyone else who dares to threaten what belongs to me." Heat bloomed in Mia's chest at his words. This dangerous, powerful man had torn apart his own family to protect her. The realization should have terrified her, but instead, it made her feel oddly safe. "Your world," she started, her voice trembling. "It's so different from everything I've known." "But it's your world now, too." Luca's fingers slid into her hair, tilting her face up to his. "You've seen who I am, what I'm capable of, and you're still here." Mia leaned into his touch, unable to deny the truth in his words. She had watched him kill today, had seen the ruthless efficiency with which he eliminated his enemies. Yet here she was, drawn to him like a moth to flame. "I should be running," she admitted. A dark smile curved Luca's lips. "But you won't. You can't." His grip tightened slightly. "Just like I can't let you go." He pulled her closer until their bodies pressed together. The heat of him seeped through her clothes, and Mia could feel the steady thrum of his heartbeat against her chest. "I've lost everything I thought I could trust," Luca murmured against her hair. "My own brother betrayed me. But you—" He pulled back to look into her eyes. "You stayed. You chose me." The intensity in his gaze made Mia's breath catch. This was the moment, the point of no return. She could feel it in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. "I won't ever let anyone harm you," Luca promised, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'll burn this city to the ground before I let that happen. You're mine now, Mia. Do you understand what that means?" She nodded, unable to look away from his dark eyes. The possessiveness in his voice should have warned her away, but instead, it made her feel cherished, protected. Luca guided her toward the leather couch, pulling her down to rest against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, strong and secure, a cage she no longer wanted to escape. The mansion's silence felt different now. Mia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's study, watching the sun set behind the carefully manicured gardens. Everything looked peaceful, pristine, a stark contrast to the violence that had unfolded just days ago. Her reflection stared back at her, and she barely recognized herself anymore. The innocent nurse who had refused to unplug a dangerous man's life support seemed like a stranger now. That decision had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Luca's voice, low and commanding, came from behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know he was watching her with those intense eyes of his, studying her every movement. "About choices," she answered honestly, wrapping her arms around herself. "About how one decision can change your entire life." She heard his footsteps approaching, felt the heat of his body as he stood behind her. His hands settled on her shoulders, strong and possessive. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Saving my life?" Mia closed her eyes, fighting the shiver that ran through her body at his proximity. "I don't know anymore," she whispered. "Everything I thought I knew about right and wrong, it's all blurred now." His grip tightened slightly. "Because of me?" "Because of everything." She turned to face him, meeting his gaze. "The violence, the danger, the way you handle things. I've seen sides of you that terrify me, Luca." His jaw clenched, but he didn't look away. "I won't apologize for who I am, Mia. This is my world, the only way I know how to protect what's mine." "That's exactly it," she said, stepping back from his touch. "You see me as something that belongs to you, a possession." "No." His voice was sharp, authoritative. "You're not a possession. You're everything." He reached for her again, and this time when his hands cupped her face, there was a gentleness that contrasted with his usual forceful nature. "Everything I've done, everything I am, it's all to keep you safe now." Mia felt tears prickling at her eyes. "But at what cost, Luca? The killing, the constant threats. Is this really the life you want for me?" "It's the only life I can offer," he said quietly. His thumbs wiped away the tears that had escaped down her cheeks. "I can't change who I am. The world I live in, it's brutal, yes, but my love for you." He paused, and for a moment she saw that rare vulnerability in his eyes. "That's the one pure thing in my life." The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She knew he meant every word. This man who had killed his own brother to protect her, who had burned down half the city to keep her safe. His love was as dangerous as it was absolute. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Live in this world of yours? Always looking over my shoulder, always wondering who might be coming for us next. You're stronger than you think, he said, his fingers trailing down her neck. I've seen it. The way you stood up to me, the way you've handled everything that's happened. You're not some delicate flower that needs to be sheltered, Mia. You're a survivor. She looked up at him, at the face that had haunted her dreams since that first day in the hospital. The face that now represented both her greatest fear and her deepest desire. And what if I can't be what you need me to be? His expression softened, something rare and precious in his gaze. If you leave, I'll let you go, but you won't find anyone who will ever love you like I do. The morning sun filtered through the mansion's bulletproof windows, casting long shadows across Mia's face as she stood in Luca's study. Her fingers traced the edge of his mahogany desk, mind racing with everything that had happened. The violence, the passion, the danger. It all swirled together like a storm she couldn't escape. But did she want to escape anymore? Luca sat in his leather chair, watching her with those intense eyes that seemed to see right through her. His presence filled the room, demanding and powerful. Yet there was something different now. A softness in the way he looked at her. A vulnerability that only she got to witness. I can't pretend anymore, Mia said, her voice stronger than she expected. This world of yours, it terrifies me. The violence, the power, the constant threat of death. She turned to face him fully. But what terrifies me more is the thought of leaving. Luca's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her speak. I've spent weeks fighting this, she continued, moving closer to him. Fighting you, fighting us. I told myself it was Stockholm Syndrome, that I was just caught up in the danger and excitement. Her hands trembled slightly. But it's more than that, isn't it? He stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. You know what staying means, Mia. There's no halfway with me. No part-time commitment. I know. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. I've seen the worst of your world. The blood, the betrayal, the revenge. I watched you kill your own brother to protect what's yours. Her voice caught slightly. To protect me. Luca moved closer, his presence overwhelming. And you're still here. I'm still here, she whispered. Because despite everything, despite the darkness and the danger, I've never felt more alive than when I'm with you. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. The tenderness of the gesture contrasted sharply with the calluses on his fingers, earned from years of violence. You saved my life, he said, his voice low and intense. Not just in that hospital room. Every day since then you've given me something to live for beyond power and control. Mia leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the full weight of her decision. I choose this, she said firmly. I choose you. All of you, the monster and the man. His eyes darkened with possession and need. There's no going back from this, nurse. Once you're truly mine, I'll never let you go. I don't want you to. She pressed closer, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against hers. I've spent my whole life playing it safe, following rules, doing what's expected. But with you... She took a shaky breath. With you, I feel free. Luca's grip tightened slightly. You'll have to learn our ways, the family's ways. There will be times when you'll hate what I have to do. I know, she nodded. But I also know that underneath all that darkness is a man who would burn the world down to keep me safe. That's the man I'm choosing to love. Something fierce and protective flashed in his eyes. His hands slid down to her waist, pulling her flush against him. Say it again, he demanded softly. I choose you, she repeated, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. I choose this life, this world, everything that comes with being yours. Luca pulled her into his arms, his voice soft but filled with intensity. You're mine. Forever. There's no going back now. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Mia stood at the window, watching the city below come alive with the dawn. Behind her, she heard Luca's purposeful footsteps approach. Beautiful view, isn't it? His voice was low and intimate as he wrapped his arms around her waist. But not as beautiful as you. Mia leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The past few weeks had changed everything. The violence and betrayal that had nearly torn them apart had instead forged something unbreakable between them. I never thought I'd be here, she admitted, watching his reflection in the glass. Standing in this room, in your arms, feeling safe, Luca finished, his grip tightening slightly. You are safe. No one will ever hurt you again. She turned in his arms, studying the face that had haunted her dreams since that first day in the hospital. The scars from the assassination attempt had faded, but they'd left their mark. Just like the emotional scars they both carried. It's more than that, Mia said, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. I feel complete, like everything that happened was leading us here. Luca caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. His eyes darkened with intensity. You've changed me, nurse, made me stronger, better. The empire he'd built was expanding, growing more powerful by the day. But it wasn't just about territory or influence anymore. Luca had transformed from the cold, ruthless boss she'd first met into something more complex. He was still dangerous. She'd seen that firsthand when he'd dealt with Enzo's remaining loyalists. But now there was purpose behind his actions. Your enemies are afraid, Mia observed, remembering the fearful looks from rival families at the last meeting. They see us together and know they can't touch you. A smile played at the corners of Luca's mouth. They should be afraid. I have something worth protecting now, something worth living for. He led her across the office to his desk, where blueprints and documents were spread out. Plans for new ventures, legitimate businesses that would secure their future. Mia recognized the hospital where they'd first met among them. I bought it, he said simply. Now you can help people without anyone questioning your choices. No more protocols telling you who deserves to live. Mia's breath caught. He'd remembered her frustration about that day, about being told to let him die. Luca, you saved my life that day, he continued, pulling her closer. Not just by keeping me alive, but by showing me there was more to existence than power and control. You gave me a heart, Mia. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the strong, steady rhythm beneath. You always had a heart. You just needed someone to remind you how to use it. Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of possession and promise. When they parted, Luca's eyes were intense with emotion. I would burn down the world for you, he whispered against her mouth. But instead, I'm building one worthy of you. They moved together to the window again, watching their city spread out before them. Mia saw it differently now, not as a place of danger and darkness, but as their kingdom, a place where they could create something meaningful together. Luca's empire was stronger than ever, but it wasn't built on fear alone anymore. There was respect, loyalty, and most importantly, love. Their love had transformed not just them, but everything around them. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Mia felt Luca's arms tighten around her. This was where she belonged. Not as his prisoner or his nurse, but as his equal, his partner, his heart. We're untouchable now, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Nothing can come between us. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Mia stood at the window, watching the city below come to life. Behind her, she felt Luca's presence before his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" His voice was rough with sleep, his breath warm against her neck. Mia leaned back into him, allowing herself to feel the solid strength of his body. "Everything that's changed. How different my life is now." Luca's hands tightened on her waist. "Do you regret it?" She turned in his arms, studying his face. The hardness that usually masked his features had softened, showing the vulnerability he reserved only for her. The bruises from his recent fights had faded, leaving behind the sharp angles of his jaw and the intensity in his dark eyes. "No," she said softly. "I don't regret it." Something shifted in his expression. He led her to the leather couch near the window, pulling her down beside him. His fingers traced patterns on her skin, a gentle touch that contrasted with the dangerous power she knew those hands possessed. "I never told you about my mother," he said suddenly, his voice low. "She died when I was young. Cancer. I watched her fade away, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it." He swallowed hard. "That's why, when I saw you in that hospital, refusing to give up on me, it meant something." Mia placed her hand over his. "Is that why you became so obsessed with keeping me?" "At first." He met her gaze. "But then I saw your strength, your defiance, the way you stood up to me even when you were terrified. You became more than just the nurse who saved me. You became everything." The confession hung heavy in the air between them. Luca had never been this open, this raw. He pulled her closer, his fingers tangling in her hair. "When Enzo took you," he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I realized I'd rather burn everything to the ground than lose you. The empire, the power, none of it matters without you." Mia's heart raced at the memory of those dark days, of the violence that had nearly torn them apart. "You killed your own brother for me. And I'd do it again." His words were fierce, absolute. "Every person who ever threatened you, every obstacle in our way, I'd eliminate them all. That's who I am, Mia. I won't apologize for it." She touched his face, tracing the scar that ran along his jaw. "I know who you are, Luca. I've seen the darkness, the violence. But I've also seen this, the man who holds me at night, who trusts me enough to show me his heart." His eyes darkened with emotion. "You're the only one who's ever seen this side of me. The only one who ever will." He pulled her onto his lap, his hands spanning her waist. "When I was lying in that hospital bed, barely alive, I heard your voice. You fought for me when everyone else wanted to let me die. Now I'll spend the rest of my life fighting for you." The passion between them ignited, as it always did. His lips found hers in a kiss that was both tender and possessive. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This isn't just about ownership anymore. It's not about control or power. You've become part of me, Mia, the best part." Tears pricked at her eyes as she watched the usually unshakable mafia boss bare his soul to her. This was the side of Luca that no one else would ever see. The vulnerable man beneath the monster, the heart beneath the violence. "You are my world, Mia," he whispered against her lips. "Nothing will ever take you from me." The soft glow of sunrise painted Luca's study in hues of gold and amber. Mia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her fingers tracing patterns on the cool glass. Behind her, Luca worked at his desk, the scratch of his pen against paper a familiar comfort now. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, filled with understanding. She watched his reflection in the window, studying the way his shoulders moved as he wrote. The dangerous man who had once terrified her was still there, but now she saw so much more. The tenderness in his touch when he held her, the vulnerability in his eyes when they were alone, the fierce protectiveness that made her feel safer than she'd ever been. "What are you thinking about?" Luca's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to find him watching her, his dark eyes intense. "Us," she answered honestly. "How different everything is now." Luca pushed back from his desk, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. He crossed the room in long strides, coming to stand behind her. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. The familiar scent of his cologne enveloped her. "Different good?" he murmured against her ear. Mia leaned into him, letting her head rest against his shoulder. "Different everything. When you first woke up in that hospital room, I was terrified of you." His grip tightened slightly. "And now?" "Now I'm terrified of losing you." Luca turned her in his arms, one hand coming up to cup her face. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the gesture gentle despite the calluses on his hands. Hands that had killed, that had torn apart his enemies, but had never been anything but tender with her. "You'll never lose me," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Everything I've done, everything I am, it's all for you now." Mia reached up, tracing the scar that ran along his jaw, a reminder of the assassination attempt that had brought them together. "I used to think I could never love someone like you. A man who lives in violence, who kills without hesitation. And now..." There was a hint of vulnerability in his question, a crack in his usual confident facade. "Now I understand that love isn't simple. It's not black and white." She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her touch. "You're still that man, but you're also so much more. You're the man who holds me through nightmares, who makes me feel safe in a world of danger." Luca's eyes darkened with passion and possession. He backed her up against the window, his body pressing against hers. "You changed everything, Mia. Before you, I only knew how to destroy. Now..." He paused, searching for words. "Now I know what it means to protect something precious." The sunrise cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his features. Mia reached up, running her fingers through his dark hair. "We've both changed. I'm not the same person who stood in that hospital room, refusing to unplug you." "No," he agreed, a small smile playing at his lips. "You're stronger now. Fiercer." His hand slid down to her hip, gripping possessively. "But you're still just as stubborn." Mia laughed softly, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "Someone has to stand up to you." "Only you," he murmured, leaning down to brush his lips against hers. "Only you get to challenge me, to see me vulnerable, to know all of me." The kiss deepened, filled with all the passion and tenderness that defined their relationship. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice serious. "This isn't just about love or possession anymore. You're part of me now, Mia. Every breath, every heartbeat, they're yours." Tears pricked at Mia's eyes as she nodded. "I know, because you're part of me too. All of you, the darkness and the light." Luca pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. Finding what he was looking for, he took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Together they turned to face the rising sun, ready to step into whatever the future held. "You're mine forever, Mia," he whispered. "No one else." The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's office, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Mia stood by his side, her hand resting on his shoulder as he reviewed the latest reports from his territory. The tension that had once filled these moments had mellowed into something different, something deeper. Luca's fingers traced over the papers before him, but his attention kept drifting to Mia's touch. He reached up, capturing her hand in his. "Do you remember the first time you stood in this office?" he asked, his voice carrying none of the cold edge it once had. "How could I forget?" Mia smiled, remembering the fear and defiance that had coursed through her veins. "I thought you were going to kill me." "And now?" Luca turned in his chair, pulling her onto his lap. His hands, capable of such violence, were always gentle with her. "Now I know you'd kill for me instead." She traced the scar on his jaw, a reminder of everything they'd survived together. The empire Luca had built stretched across the city, stronger than ever. His enemies had learned their lesson after Enzo's betrayal. Crossing Luca Vetro meant death, but threatening Mia meant something far worse. The underworld whispered about how the ruthless mafia boss had become even more dangerous since finding love, not weaker as some had predicted. "I never thought I'd have this," Luca admitted, his thumb brushing across her bottom lip. "Power, yes. Control, always. But this—" he gestured between them. "This kind of peace? I thought it was for other men." Mia leaned into his touch, understanding the weight of his words. The man who had once terrified her had become her sanctuary. "You've changed," she observed, "only for you." His eyes darkened with intensity. Everything else, everyone else, they still see the monster, the killer, the man who rules through fear. "And that's how it should be," Mia said firmly. "Your enemies need to fear you, but I get to love you." Luca stood suddenly, lifting her with him. His movements were fluid, powerful, a reminder that beneath his controlled exterior, he was still the dangerous man who had claimed her. He walked them to the window overlooking the city, his arms wrapped around her from behind. "Look," he commanded softly. "Everything you see, it's all ours now, not just mine. Ours." Mia gazed at the skyline, remembering how she'd once viewed it all as a prison. Now she saw it differently, as their kingdom, built on blood but protected by love. "When you refused to unplug me in that hospital," Luca continued, his breath warm against her neck, "you changed everything. You defied death itself for me." "I didn't know it then, but I was already yours," Mia admitted, turning in his arms to face him. "Even when I was fighting against it." His hand cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheek. The tenderness in his touch contrasted sharply with the dangerous glint that never quite left his eyes. "Mine," he agreed. "Forever." The word hung between them, heavy with promise. Mia had learned that forever meant something different in Luca's world. It meant absolute devotion, unconditional protection, and a love that burned hot enough to consume everything in its path. "Your empire is secure now," she said, running her hands up his chest. "No one dares to challenge you." "Our empire," he corrected, capturing her hands in his. "You're not just the woman I love, Mia. You're the heart of everything I've built. The reason I fight harder, rule stronger." The sun caught the ring on her finger, not just a symbol of their love, but a mark of her place in his world. She was no longer just the nurse who saved him. She was his equal, his partner, his queen. "Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come," Mia whispered, remembering the frightened nurse who once stood at his hospital bed, making a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Believe it," Luca said firmly, his arms tightening around her. "Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours. The violence, the power, the protection, the love, the devotion, the future. All of it." The evening sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's mansion, painting golden streaks across the marble floors. Mia stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker to life in the distance. Behind her, she heard Luca's familiar footsteps, steady and purposeful, approaching. His presence filled the room before he even touched her. That magnetic pull between them hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger through every trial they'd faced together. Mia's breath caught as his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" His voice was low, intimate, brushing against her ear. Mia leaned into him, letting her head rest against his shoulder. "Everything that brought us here. How different things were when I first refused to unplug you in that hospital room." Luca's grip tightened slightly. "You saved my life that day, in more ways than one." She turned in his arms to face him, studying the face she'd come to know so well. The scars from the assassination attempt had faded, but they were still there, a reminder of how close she'd come to losing him before she even had him. His dark eyes held that same intensity they always had, but now there was something else there too, something softer, meant only for her. "Your enemies thought they could destroy you," Mia said, running her fingers along his jaw. "They never stood a chance." A dangerous smile curved Luca's lips. "No one can touch us now. My empire is stronger than ever." His hand came up to cradle her face. "But you're the real reason I'm invincible." The weight of his words settled over them. Mia remembered the violence, the betrayal, the moments when she thought everything would fall apart. But through it all, their bond had only grown stronger. What started as captivity had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted. "I used to be afraid of this world," Mia admitted, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "Afraid of you, of what loving you meant." Luca's eyes darkened at her words. "And now?" "Now I know that some things are worth the risk, worth fighting for." She pressed closer to him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We've faced death, betrayal, your own brother's treachery, and we're still standing." His hands slid down her arms, leaving trails of heat in their wake. "I told you from the beginning, you're mine. Nothing will ever change that." The possessiveness in his voice still sent shivers down her spine, but now it was different. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about belonging, about choosing each other despite everything. "The nurse who refused to let me die," he murmured, his lips brushing against her temple. "The woman who saw past the monster everyone else feared." His voice grew rougher. "The only person I've ever truly trusted." Mia's heart swelled at his words. This was the real Luca, the man behind the ruthless mafia boss, the one who'd learned to love despite a lifetime of betrayal and violence. He was still dangerous, still capable of terrible things, but with her, he was something else entirely. "I love you," she whispered, the words falling naturally from her lips. "All of you. The darkness and the light." His eyes blazed with emotion as he pulled her closer. "You're my redemption, Mia, my salvation." His fingers tangled in her hair. "And you're mine. Forever." Mia reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. "Forever," she agreed. Luca's gaze dropped to her lips, his expression intense. "You'll always be mine, Mia," he whispered, before capturing her mouth in a passionate kiss that spoke of possession, protection, and a love that had survived the darkest of storms. "I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day."